Welcome back to Train Signal. This video is creating organizational units, user and computer accounts, and groups. I was trying to think of a good subtitle for this one, but I think the title pretty much says it all. So let's just go ahead and jump on into what's covered in this video. We're going to start off with a kind of a part two of the DCs are up and running, and I want to talk with you about what our next steps are, which are going to be basically creating stuff in our Active Directory. We're going to start off with OUs, also known as organizational units, and then talk about how to create user accounts. And I'm going to talk with you about the long way and then a shorter way. Then I'm going to talk with you about how you can create a whole bunch of users at once. I mean, literally thousands of users if you need to. And then we're going to talk about computer accounts and why you need those in there, just so you know you don't really have a choice. Right? So we're going to take a look at how to add that in there. Then we'll talk about the differences between OUs and groups. I'm going to show you how to create groups and how to add users to them. So that's what's on tap for this one. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so again, the domain controllers are up and running. What do we do next? Now that we can access that DC1 server remotely, we're going to populate it. And populate is just a fancy word that means put stuff into a space, i.e. what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding in objects to our Active Directory. And we really have the brain already set up. We have the two domain controllers going, but let's face it, it's not particularly usable yet because the only people who have access to it is, well, me. And that's it. All we have is an administrator account. And we have one client. And that technically is a network, but not particularly usable. So we're going to be adding in organizational units, user accounts, computer accounts, and we're also going to be adding in groups. And we're going to be accessing DC1 via remote desktop to add in all of our objects. Now we're not going to put these over on DC2 because remember how we talked about the domain controllers need to talk to each other and they need to update each other. So we're going to let replication take care of that for us over onto DC2. Now, what we're going to be building in terms of the GlobaMantics AD structure, we're going to start off very simple. We've already created the domain administrator account, and just in case you're wondering, that's you. All right, that's what you always start off with. And then we're going to be creating one folder called New York OU. Now, this folder is going to also have other folders in it, NY users. So we're going to create this NY users OU, and then we're going to populate that folder with 25 user accounts. And I know it sounds a little daunting at first, but again, I'm going to show you a really easy way that you can add in a whole bunch of folks into that OU really fast. We're also going to be creating 4 groups for the users. For access control, we'll talk a little more about that when we get there. We're also going to be creating a separate folder for all of our computers. Now, this is going to make our life easier, trust me. We'll only have 2 computer accounts because, well, the other 23 computers that everyone else needs to use, they're on back order. Right? Computer suppliers, what can you say, right? Then we're going to be creating 2 groups for computers. We'll create one for the IT computers, and then we'll create one for the standard computers that everybody else is going to use. So at the end of the day, I want to just kind of bring us back here to our domain structure. Everything that we're going to be creating is going to be in this globamantics.com domain. It's all going to belong there. And also remember that whenever you are creating stuff in Active Directory in a domain, it all lives in an Active Directory database on the domain controllers. Remember, the domain controllers are really kind of the bosses of the network, and they need to be able to keep track of pretty much everything that's happening. So don't forget, all of this stuff lives in the database on these 2 machines. All right, so let's go ahead and let's jump right in. Let's start talking about the first kind of object we're going to be creating, which is an OU, also known as an organizational unit. It's really a pretty simple concept. If you want to think about it, it's a container or just a folder that holds AD objects like user accounts, computer accounts, groups, the basic core stuff of Active Directory. So it's all going to go live somewhere. It all has to live basically in an OU. Now, technically, I suppose you could say that user accounts don't have to live in OU, but I guess if you're looking to have a nightmare of a network, I say go for it, But OUs help keep your objects organized. They keep your user accounts separated out. You can separate them out by departments, by location. There's all kinds of ways you can do it. but they're also used to control what users can and can't do, among other things. And the nice thing about OUs is that you can also use them to pass the buck. You can use them to give responsibility to another administrator over a particular section of your users or your computers. So we're going to talk about that in a completely different video though in this series, but I just want to kind of give you a quick overview of what an organizational unit can do. Now we're going to start off building a few organizational units so that our user and computer accounts, they got to have somewhere to live. So we're going to start real simple. We're going to create a New York organizational unit. We're going to create basically a folder for all of our New York stuff. Now later on down the line, just so you know, we'll probably break this out a little more, but we'll start easy and simple and work our way up. Now we're also going to be creating what we call a child OU. A child OU is just a folder that lives inside of another folder. All right? So an organizational unit that lives in another organizational unit. Pretty simple concept. Don't get too confused by the term child OU. It's just an OU that lives inside of another OU. We're going to be creating one for the New York users, obviously, and then we're also going to be creating one for the New York computers. Now, here's the thing. If you want to make your life easier for administration, make sure you keep your OUs for your users and your computers separate. Now, technically, you can put your computers in the same OU as your users, but it's going to make your life hard later, and you might suffer some performance hits later on down the line. So, just kind of keep this in mind as you start thinking about your organizational structure and your Active Directory. Now, you can organize your organizational units any way you like. Some folks like to do it geographically. Some folks like to do it by function, i.e., the departments and stuff, what people actually do. There's a billion ways out there. If you stick 4 different administrators in one room, you'll get 8 different opinions about how you should organize your Active Directory. Here's my thing, and here's what Microsoft also recommends. You want to make sure that you KISS as much as you are able to, and that simply stands for Keep It Simple Sysadmin. All right, so keep it simple, System Administrator. That's what I want you to remember when you're starting off with your organizational units. So we know what we want to build. Let's go over to our Vista machine. Let's log in via the remote desktop, and let's get into Active Directory users and computers, and let's start setting these up. All right, so here we are over at our Vista client. We set this one up in the last video, right? Let's go ahead and let's move on over to DC1 by double-clicking on the desktop shortcut we built. It should just pop right up here for us because remember we saved our credentials last time, and there it is. All right, so here we are also in the Server Manager. So the Server Manager, again, is your one-stop shop to get a lot of your daily stuff done. Remember, you can't get to everything from Server Manager, but you can get to most stuff that you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to go ahead and stretch this out here a little bit. Here's our Active Directory Domain Services Role section, and here's Active Directory Users and Computers. We're going to be doing almost all of our work in this particular section of Active Directory in the Server Manager. Here's our globomantics.com domain, and here's a bunch of organizational units that were created for us earlier, as well as a test dummy organization unit. Remember when we were testing out replication? Yeah, that's from that. Now we have some users that are already built in. Let's take a quick look at those guys here. We have a whole bunch of groups that are set up here for us. We have a guest account, and we have our SuperCoach administrator account that we renamed in a previous video. So in terms of users, what do we got? We got 2. We got the administrator and the guest. Normally the guest account is disabled by default. Let's go ahead and let's right click on it. Let's go to properties. Let's double check and see if that guy is actually disabled or not. We're going to go to the account tab here, and now here in account options, I'm going to scroll down here. You see where it says account is disabled. That's a good thing. Generally speaking, especially on the server and in a Windows network, we always just disable the guest account unless we have a really good reason not to. It's one of those little security things that you want to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're setting one up. All right, so we're going to be creating our own organizational units. This stuff that has been pre-built for us, that's all fine and good, but there's only so much that we can do with these. So we're going to go ahead and go here to Globomantics, clicking right on it. I'm going to right-click on Globomantics, go to New, and then select Organizational Unit. Yeah, it's that easy. You just right-click. And now let's go ahead and create our New York OU to start off with. And you'll notice here that the protect container from accidental deletion is checked. I'm going to go ahead and tell that okay. And that little guy is, little check mark is exactly what it says. If I tried to delete it right now, I'm going to hit the delete key while New York OU is selected. It's going to ask me, are you sure you want to delete it? Yeah, sure, I'm sure. And it's going to say, no, you can't do that. All right, well, that's neat. And the reason for that, again, is because we had that little protect from accidental deletion check marked. Now, if I wanted to delete this OU, there's something specific that I need to do in order to get to that property where I could turn off that protect from accidental deletion. I need to go here to the View menu and select Advanced Features. Now, Advanced Features just gives you a whole bunch more options that normally aren't there. All right, so you see that we even have some extra OUs in here, like Lost and Found and such. Well, let's go ahead and let's right-click on this New York OU now. Let's go into its properties. And now let's go to the Object tab. In the Object tab, here it is, Protect Object from Accidental Deletion. So if I uncheck it, tell it OK, now what I can do is I can select New York OU, I can hit the delete key, I can tell it yes, and now it just goes away. Okay? So if you need to delete something but that protect from accidental deletion is turned on, remember you have to go to View and Advanced Features first. I'm just going to go ahead and leave Advanced Features on for the time being because I like to have all of my tools out in front of me. I don't like to have to go searching for stuff when I need it. All right, so let's go ahead and let's recreate now that New York OU by right-clicking on Globematics, going to New, and going to Organizational Unit. And once again, we'll just do this real quick. New York OU, making sure that Protect Container from Accidental Deletion is checked and telling it OK. All right, so here he is. And now we're going to be creating two more, right? We need one for the NY users and one for NY computers. Now, when I have New York OU selected here, in the middle window, it shows me what's actually in that particular container or that OU. I'm going to right-click here inside of this OU, New York OU, select New, and select Organizational Unit. Now we're going to create our NY Users folder, and I'm going to make sure that this guy is checkmarked again, telling it OK. And now you see here that the middle window has changed to NY Users. NY Users is now a child OU of New York OU. Right, let's create one more child OU, another folder that lives inside of a folder, right? By selecting New and Organization Unit here for the New York OU, and let's do NY Computers. Protecting the container from accidental deletion again and telling it OK. So now I have my New York OU. It has NY users and NY computers, and that's it. So creating OUs inside of this Active Directory users and computers section of our server manager is really a snap. I mean, you go in your right click, right? You name it and just make sure that that little protect check mark is there so that way you don't accidentally delete it at 3 o'clock in the morning after you've been running an 18-hour shift. All right, so why do I say that? Because I've done that. So moving on, our first section is completed. Our computers and user accounts now have somewhere to live. So now let's talk about creating user accounts. All right, so user accounts. We do want people to actually be able to access all of this hard work that we're putting into this right now, right? So you do want people to log in. You do want people to use the network, and that's what user accounts do. They allow users to access network resources. And without them, they're pretty much stuck. So just as a quick illustration here, let's say we have Stockbroker Billy, all right? And Stockbroker Billy says, you know, it's time to make some money. Give me some access to some stuff on the network. And so he logs in with his username and password. So he goes ahead and sends a request over to NYDC2. Now, why NYDC2? Well, Billy might happen to be on the same floor as NYDC2 instead of NYDC1. There's a variety of reasons why he might log in here. So NYDC2 says, you know what, hold up now, Billy, because I need to see if you have an account in Active Directory. And so NYDC2 thinks about it for a while, looks around in Active Directory and says, oh, hey, yep, I found it. It's all good. Now I'm going to give you access to your stuff because Stockbroker Billy has a user account in Active Directory and it's in good standing. So NYDC2 goes ahead and grants access to all of the network resources that Billy's account has access to. And that's what user accounts are all about. So let's talk about adding some users now. Here's the users that we're going to add. Now, Hank Richardson, and you see a nifty picture here of Hank, in his cowboy hat riding a horse. The CEO of Globomantics, he's just sent you an Excel sheet of 25 names of new employees that will be needing user accounts. And here they are. Hank Richardson, Melanie Halal, blah, blah, blah. You see the list, right? 25 users. Now, we can initially create these users very quickly inside of Active Directory users and computers by right-clicking. I'm going to go ahead and move us back over to the Vista client, and let's take a look at how to right-click to create a new user. All right, so here we are back onto the DC1 machine via remote desktop, and we're going to be creating our users here in NY users. So I'm going to double-click on NY users. I'm going to right-click, go to New. I'm going to go to User. And let's go ahead, let's create Hank Richardson's account real quick. So we'll put in Hank. I'm going to skip the initials for right now. And we'll put in Richardson. And now we're going to need to create Hank's username. So we're going to be using the first initial and the last name of each person as their username. Right? So pretty simple. You put in the first name, last name, the full name fills in. You could put in initials if you like. That's up to you. And then make sure you put in the user logon name for that specific person. I'm going to tell it next. And now I need to create a password that will initially be used. And I want to make sure, though, that the user, even if it's Hank, has to change the password at the next logon. It's just good security. Now, if I have a user that I know cannot remember their password to save their life, I may check this. But you see that I cannot check both user must change password next login and user cannot change password for the same user. So we have to pick one or the other, right? Now, since I know Hank, I know he's fairly computer savvy, so I'm going to go ahead and let Hank pick his own password at the next logon, next time that he logs on to our brand new network. We can also specify that the password never expires or that the account is disabled. Now, these are not things we want to be doing right now, so we'll tell it next. And it just tells you a little bit about what's going to be happening here. When you click Finish, this object will be created. The user account for Hank, his logon name, and that the Hank must change his password at the next logon. So I'm going to click on Finish, and now Hank Richardson is now part of our Active Directory, so if he swings by the new shop, he can go ahead and log in on the machine. Not that there's anything there to really access, but he can at least log in. All right, so right now what I'm thinking is, every time I right-click and I go to New, and I go to User, I have to type all this stuff in and go through 3 different screens in order to create a user. Now, if I have to create 1 or 2 users, okay, not a big deal. But you know what? That's not the case. We have to create 25 users. Yeah, 25. I'm not crazy about this whole right-clicking methodology to do that. So let's go ahead and let's bounce back on over to the slides because I want to talk with you about how you can create users a whole lot faster than what we just did here. All right, so again, we have 25 users to create. Well, we can cross Hank off the list, right? Because we got Hank's account in there. We're A-OK for that. But we still have 24 other users to create. And I want to show you some easy ways, I should say an easier way to do this. I wanted to talk with you about DSAdd. This is a very cool tool, and I think that once you get your head wrapped around it, I think you're probably going to use it a lot. I think you'll like it. It's a command line option, and you can actually type a few commands and create users using only the keyboard. And here's the basic command. It's DSAdd, and then what we're going to be creating, user. And now this whole big mess right here, this is what we call the distinguished name. Now the distinguished name is what a user account actually looks like if you were to look at the raw version of the Active Directory database. So here we have cn equals username. So we would put in the username at this particular point. We would put in the OU that we want the user account to live in, and then we put in the DC, which is the domain name, and then we put in the suffix of the domain here. Now here's what it would look like actually in real life. It would actually look like DSAddUser CN equals Hank Richardson, which is the username, OU equals NY users, OU equals New York OU, DC equals Globomantics, DC equals com. If I was to create Hank's account via the command line, this is exactly what I would type. Now you notice here I have two OU entries. Right? Remember how I was talking with you about how we have a child OU? Remember how NY users is the child? Well, that old adage, women and children go first. Well, in this case, child OUs go first in our distinguished name entry. Right? So we have the child OU, the parent OU, New York OU, and then we have the rest of the Globomantics.com name. Now I know it looks kind of like spaghetti initially, but it's going to take a little bit for you to get your head wrapped around it, but I promise once you do, you're really going to dig it, because here's the thing. We also need to add in some switches for first name, last name, password, must change password, all these things. Now these switches, let me point them out to you here. They're down here in red. And they're very, very simple. -FN stands for first name. -LN stands for last name. Then we have the dash, and it's kind of separated here, -PWD. The -PWD is password. And then in order to force a user to change their password, we put in a little switch called must CHPWD. Now, here's the thing. If I wanted to do everything that we just did in the Active Directory users and computers, when I right-clicked and I filled in all those little boxes, this is the command that we actually ran. Okay? This whole DSAdd thing. This is what we really did. So if I wanted to do this at the command line, I had to type in all of this stuff. So right now you're thinking, okay, coach, so if I don't want to do the right-click thing, I could type in all this stuff every time I wanted to create a user account? Well, yeah, that's one way you could do it. But the reason why I talked you through this command line option is that I want you to use this command faster and easier than typing it all in every time. As a matter of fact, I only want you to type it once and then use a shortcut to it. Let me talk you through the next section, and then we're going to turn around and do this. First of all, we're going to open up Notepad, and we're going to type out the similar command. It's going to be DSAddUser. Then we're going to put in CN, which by the way stands for common name. Sometimes you might hear people say canonical name. It's really common. Then we're going to put in this %1. Now this %1 is going to allow us to type in the username. Okay? Then we're going to put in the rest of our stuff. OU equals OU name. DC equals your domain. DC equals your suffix. Then we're going to put in our switches. First name. Then we're going to put in %2. That's going to let us type in our user's first name. %3 is going to allow us to type in our user's last name. The -password, we're going to go ahead and set a password for our users so that they have to use this password when they first log in. And then this last switch is going to force our user to actually change their password when they log in for the first time. So this password that we're setting up here is only going to be used once, and that's it. Now, we're not going to type this exact thing. I'm going to show you what the script is we're going to type in, because we're going to be subbing in some stuff in here for the OU name. So when you sit down to write a script, okay, don't copy this exactly. Everything that you see that is in italics, okay, that stuff you fill in with your own information for your domain. Okay, don't be typing in OU equals OU name unless you have an OU that's called OU name, which doesn't make any sense anyway. So then we're going to save this file as ouname.bat, or I should say add ouname.bat. We're going to save it in a convenient place. Then we're going to open up a command line. We're going to navigate to whatever folder that this script, that this file, add ouname.bat lives. And then we're going to type something as simple as add whatever the OU name is. We're going to add in the username. We're going to add in their first name and last name, and that's it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reducing all that clicking and typing really down to one line of text. Okay. And just as a quick note here, the T. Miller in this little example, this is going to replace that percentile 1. Tanya is going to replace the percentile 2 for first name. And then Miller is going to replace the percentile 3 for the last name. And that's going to create a user account quickly and easily, a lot faster than right-clicking and going through all those steps. So let's go ahead and let's move back on over to the Vista machine, and let's create this little batch script for our New York users here real quick. It won't take very long, and I think once you see what the power of this is, you're going to just fall in love with this thing. All right, so back here on NYDC1, let's go to the Start menu and let's open up Notepad. So we're going to start off our script here. We're going to type dsadd space user space. We're going to put in quotes. We're going to type CN equals, and we're going to put in our first percentile 1. If you've done any programming ever, that's what we would normally call a variable, if you will. I'm going to put in a comma. We're going to do space OU equals NY users. Now, why are we putting in NY users again? Remember, women and children go first. This is a child OU where all of our user accounts are really going to go live at. So NY users comes first. Then we do a comma. OU equals, and now we put in the parent OU, which is New York OU, comma, and then we put in DC equals, and then we put in Globomantics, comma, then DC equals com. And remember, when we're typing out the distinguished name, we do not use the dot. So it's not globomantics.com. It's just DC equals Globomantics, comma, DC com equals com. We put in quotes. Okay, now we put in our switches. So we're going to start off with the first name, dash FN, space, and then we do a percentile 2, space, dash LN for last name. We're going to be able to type the last name by doing a percentile 3, space, now we need to do the password thing, dash PWD, space, and now we're going to go ahead and just hard code the password. So all of the users that we create with this script will have to have that particular password in there. Space, and now dash must chpwd. Remember, that is the must change password switch, and we'll set that to yes. All right, so we've typed out this long script just once, but we're going to be able to type and create user accounts very quickly, very easily, by just switching out some stuff. And actually, Windows is going to do it for us. So let's go ahead and let's finish this out so you can see its power. I'm going to go to File and Save As. I'm going to save this guy on the local disk C. It's just somewhere that it's convenient. It doesn't really matter where you save it to. I'm saving it here for just pure, sheer hedonistic convenience. All right. So the file name is going to be add New York user.bat. And you know what? I think I'm going to even shorten it up from that. I'm just going to put in add NY, okay, for New York. The most important thing that you need to do at this stage in the game, it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it Bubba or Harry or Spot. I don't care. You just need to make sure that it's something that you can recognize. And then we're going to make sure where it says save as type, we're going to select all files to make sure that this .bat ends up at the end of the name of the file. Okay? Now I click on save. And now I'm going to close this guy out. I'm going to come down here. It looks like my command line is already open. And just as a quick reminder, the command line prompt, you should be at least a little bit familiar with it at this point in time. You should know how to do an IP config and some very basic network administrative tasks. But in case you don't know how to get to this one more time, I'm going to close it. I'm going to go to the Start menu, and I can just type CMD, and it'll show up here at the top. I can press the Enter key and bring it up. All right, so I'm going to type CD. I'm going to put a backslash here and hit the Enter key. Notice how that changed my directory from user/administrator just to the C drive. Now if I type dir, that's going to bring up the directory, basically a listing of all the files in that particular folder in the C drive. So you'll see here, here's my add.ny.bat file that I just created. Now check this out. Add ny space, and tell you what, let's just make up a user here real quick. So we're going to create test dummy, and we'll use that for the time being. We'll put in his first name, which is test, his last name, which is dummy, and hit the enter key. Now what just happened there is that file that we saved out as add.ny.bat, it took the stuff that I typed in order, test dummy, and then test, and then dummy, and then substituted in those values for where we had our percentile numbers. So test dummy here got substituted in for percentile 1. Test got substituted in for percentile 2 here for the first name. Dummy got substituted in for the last name. Piece of cake, isn't it? I mean, holy cow, can it be any easier than that? I mean, you could sit here, you could do this all day. Add ny space B Wayne, and we'll put in here Bruce Wayne real quick. Of course, we'll probably have to go in and delete all these guys after we add them because we need to add in some real users. Add ny space. Let's put in Zig Ziglar. Okay, so I mean, it's very easy. You know, you could type this stuff in all day. Oops, you know what? I kind of screwed that one up, didn't I? Because I didn't put in the username here because I forgot. That's what happens when I type and talk at the same time, huh? Here, let's do this. Z Ziglar. There we go. You notice here that the DS add failed. No value specified for last name. Well, I didn't actually finish it out, did I? So now I hit the enter key. There we go. DS add succeeded. Let's go ahead and let's move back here to the server manager. And notice that the only user that's currently showing up is Hank Richardson. But again, I'm going to press Fy at the top of my keyboard, and that's going to refresh the screen, and that's going to bring up the users that I've just created. It's going to redraw the screen to make sure that I have the most updated information from the Active Directory database. And there we have it, friends. It's really easy to use that little script. And by the way, this script is included with the course, so you have something to start with. And it's just a text file. It's not anything special. It's just a text file with .bat at the end of its name. All right, so that's one way to do it. But you know what? I'm still not convinced that I want to type in 25 usernames. Yeah, I know. It's kind of lazy, right? So tell you what, let me take you back over to the slides. And I want to talk with you about one more way that we can actually create this batch script quickly and easily using Excel. So, I mean, seriously, dude, there must be a faster way, and there is. We can actually use Excel to create a batch script using concatenate and all kinds of other little bitty tricks. Now, some of you have in the past said, well, I'm going to be a system administrator. I don't need to know Excel or Word or PowerPoint. Yes, you do. Okay? Yes, you do. If you're going to be the system administrator, you're going to be amazed at how many times things like Excel are going to be really, really useful to you. So if you're not familiar with Excel, I really recommend that you get your head wrapped around it, get some training on it, buy some books, whatever you need to do. But get used to using Excel because well, I'm going to show you right now how to create literally all 25 users all at once. You wouldn't be able to do unless you had a little bit of Excel knowledge. So, and again, I'm taking this batch script creator that I've created for you in Excel that I'm about to show you. I've included this in the course too. All right, so again, you have somewhere to start whenever you're creating your own stuff. But right now, let's go ahead and let's move back on over to the Vista machine. I want to take you into this Excel sheet. I want to show you the original Excel sheet that Hank Richards sent us. And then I'm going to take those names, copy and paste them into Excel, and immediately create a script that will create all of those user accounts all at once. Come on, let's go. All right, so here we are over in Excel, and what we're looking at right now is the Globomantics new hires list. This is the sheet that Hank has sent to us. And so we actually have, let's see, 24 users. I've taken the liberty of taking Hank Richardson's name out because, well, we've already added it, right? So now we're going to be adding these 24 users. Now, if you don't know Excel and you're not as familiar with it as you should be, you really need to take some time out and you need to go get some training on it because Excel is an extremely powerful tool. As system administrators, we can build scripts inside of Excel really easily, like the one that I'm about to show you. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the first and the last names in the original sheet. Now, I'm using the keyboard shortcuts to do this, by the way. I'm holding down the Shift key, I'm pressing the End key once, I'm pressing the down arrow key once. That's a keyboard shortcut that'll select the entire set, and it will stop before we reach the end of, or I really should say, the next empty line. Now on the keyboard, I'm doing a Control C, and I'm copying this sheet. Now I'm going to go ahead and use Control Tab. I'm going to move over to the actual Excel sheet. It's right along with this course. And here's some nifty instructions, by the way, just in case you're not watching the video and you're still using this tool. I'm going to go here to add users info here. I've tried to make this as easy as possible for you. All right, I'm going to start here in cell A2. And I'm going to do a Control V on the keyboard to paste those names that I brought over from the previous sheet. Now, the child OU, we want these users to go into NY users, right? We created that OU specifically to hold our users for New York. Pressing the Tab key now, our primary OU is, let's see here, New York OU, right? Okay, so I've added these two in. I'm going to now use autofill to fill these all the way down. I'm going to click on this first box that contains NY users. I'm going to roll my mouse over the little black autofill box and double click. And you'll see that that autofills NY users all the way down. I'm going to do the same thing now for the primary OU. I'm going to double click on, I'm going to double click on that guy and fill that all the way down. Next, I'm going to go over here to the next sheet, which is Mass Creation Script Source. This is actually the source of a lot of what we're doing. Let me just show you something. Remember the usernames we were talking about earlier when we're creating the usernames with the first initial and last name? Now, that's not how every corporation is going to do it, but that's how a lot of folks do. You'll see here that the Excel sheet has generated the usernames for us. How about that? Isn't that nifty, huh? You'll see here it stops at 25, and I could leave these blank down here. It's not going to hurt anything. This is not the most critical sheet in terms of our end product. Now, if you have more than 25, you'll need to go ahead and autofill these guys down as well. You'll notice here that the child OU has filled in very nicely. The parent OU has filled in very nicely. This is the thing you need to double check though. DC equals your domain name. Now ours is, of course, is going to be Globomantic, so that we're good for that. So when you're using this for your domain, you need to make sure you come in and change this name and maybe the suffix too. Right? So if yours is .org or .com or .local or whatever it is, you need to make sure that that's set up. Ours is .com, so we're A-OK here. Now, I have one more sheet here down at the bottom where it says Save Sheet as Text File. And looky here. This is actually a concatenate formula that I have written here for you. If you know Excel and you want to get right down into it, you can go ahead and modify this on your copy that's included with the course. But for the most part, you don't have to really do too much else. Whoops, there we go. The script is actually written for you based upon the stuff that we filled in here, making sure that our domain and suffix is correctly set up. And here's your script. That's it. That's all it takes. And now all I have to do is save this guy as a text file. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to File and Save As. I'm going to save this to my desktop so it's real easy to find. But here's the most critical thing. I need to come down here to where it says Save As Type. I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to find the space delimited format. There we go. Formatted text, space delimited. So I'm going to select that one. And now I'm going to name it something that's short. So I'm going to name this one Make 24 Users. Okay. Let's see if I can learn how to spell here. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to save this guy to my desktop. It's going to cuss at me here a little bit and say, hey, you know what? This does not support multiple sheets, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's fine. Just tell it okay. And it's going to give us another warning that, hey, you know, there's some features that are in here that are not compatible with formatted text, blah, blah, blah. Yes, we want to keep the workbook or our, really this one sheet in the format that we're saving to. I'm going to tell it yes. All right, so now we're done with Excel. We're done with this guy, so we can go ahead and close out of it. And that will, of course, bring us here to the desktop of our Vista machine that we're going to be using to take this file, and we're actually going to be copying and pasting it up to DC1. Now, friends, what we're about to do is something that I absolutely love about working with remote desktop, because even though I'm on the Vista machine, I can take this Make24 users file and paste it right up onto DC1. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to right-click on this file. I'm going to select Copy. Now, you see here that DC1's remote desktop is hanging out down here in the taskbar. Let's go ahead and let's bring that one up. And now, let's go to the Start menu. Let's go to Computer. I'm just going to save it. I'm just going to copy this guy to the C drive again so it's easy to find. I'm right-clicking here in the C drive and hitting Paste. And now, my file that I just created is now living here on the C drive. Copied up. You know, it's a very easy process. And again, it's just kind of like you're sitting at that particular server. Now, right now you notice here that it's named .prn, and that does not stand for what you think it does. It stands for print. I know what you're thinking. All right, so we're going to right-click, and we're going to rename this guy. It's very easy. All I'm going to do is to take the print extension off of it and put in .bat for batch. Pressing the enter key, it's going to give me a warning that says, hey, the file may become unusable. No, it's not going to become unusable. Just tell it yes, it's fine. All right, so notice the little gears on it now. If I roll over, it tells me that this is a Windows batch file. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this now, and let's go down to the command line prompt. You see I've left it open from the last round when we were making all of our test items. I'm going to do a CLS, which stands for clear screen, just to get rid of all that stuff that's hanging out there on the screen to make this a little easier to see. So now let's do a quick dir just to make sure we're in the right place. Here's make24 users.bat, just hanging out waiting for us. So now I'm going to type make24 users, and now watch what happens when I hit the enter key. It's going to actually run all of those little scripts that we created. I don't have to do anything. You'll notice here that you see all the little DS add succeededs there at the end. Whoops, looks like we had a few that were empty where we had DS add failed. That's no big deal because we should have Frida Smith as our last one. Let's see, Frida Smith. Yep, okay, we got them all. Let's go ahead now and let's switch over to the server manager. Don't worry about these DS add faileds. If you look at the actual script that was run, DS add user cn equals nothing, OU equals nothing, OU equals nothing. All right, those were just empty blank ones that I didn't delete out of my script. I should have went back and taken a look at it, but you see that no damage was done, and there are no users created from these 3 empty lines in the script. So no worries about that. Let's go ahead and let's bounce over to the server manager now, and let's take a look. Here's the users that we had earlier. We're not seeing those other 24 users that we had created. It's real easy, don't worry. Hit the F5 key. And that will, again, remember, refresh the screen. And now we see all of the users that we have created, including Hank Richardson, which we created earlier, and those other Bruce Wayne accounts and Zig Ziglar, those dummy accounts that we created. You know, we should probably delete those real quick. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select B. Wayne. I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to hold down the Control key. And I'm going to select the test dummy account as well as the Zig Ziglar account because those were, again, just dummy accounts. And now I'm hitting the delete key. It's going to warn me. It's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to delete these? Yes, I am. Tell it yes. And now I end up with the 25 users that Hank wanted me to create, including one for himself. So, you know, that's it, friends. I mean, you know, I showed you how to create a whole bunch of users in a very, very short amount of time. So, after all that hard work that we did to create these 25 users, Ew, boy, yeah. Yep, that's just like breaking a sweat, isn't it? All right, so now that we have users, let's go ahead and let's start talking next about the computer accounts that we need. All right, so keeping on track of your computers inside of AD is a really good idea, but here's the deal, you don't really have a choice. If you're going to have client machines out there on your network accessing resources along with users, they have to be registered in AD, and that's where computer accounts come in. Basically, they just allow AD to keep track of and control the computers in your network. There's not a huge amount that you do with them on a daily basis. However, there's a lot of great things that they can provide, which is access to the network. If your computer doesn't have an account in Active Directory, let's say you have a visitor that brings in a Vista laptop and tries to connect to your network. Unless that laptop is joined to your domain, that user will not be able to access anything in your network. It's a security thing, really. So, and another quick note, computer accounts, they still live in organizational units. Now, here's the really cool thing about organizational units and computers. You can install software to a huge amount of machines that all live in the same OU all at once. And that's way cool, especially when you have to do like little software patches and virus updates and all that good stuff. If you're doing that relatively manually, well, you can actually automate the installation of those little software patches via your Active Directory computers and users. And as long as all of your computers are in that same OU, you might have to install it to several different OUs if you have many OUs that contain machines that need those software patches. But still, it's a whole lot faster than going around to, let's say you have 50 machines in your network. All right, 50 machines, not too bad. It'll take you a few hours. But you could reduce software installation time to all 50 machines to say, I don't know, 5 minutes of your actual time. So there's some really good things. And by the way, we'll talk about how to do software installations and OUs and how all that works in a different video in this very series. But that'll come later on. So now when you join a computer to the domain, one quick note, you need to have domain administrator level credentials to do that. A computer account is automatically created in Active Directory. So in our last video, when we took that Vista client and we joined it to the domain, it actually automatically created a computer account for us. Now that's really the way you should do it, okay? But after joining the domain, you need to take that computer account that it creates and you need to move it to the appropriate organizational unit. Now, here's the thing. You can create accounts manually. You can do the whole right-click thing and create the account, but it's not a good idea, okay? Just don't do it, unless you have a really good reason that you need to. For the most part, you create the computer account when you join the domain. All right, so I want you to keep that in mind. So you have exactly 2 Vista machines, as we talked about earlier, since the rest are all in back order. And we're going to use these machines to test out your Active Directory to make sure that people can log on, to make sure that everything works a-okay. Now, the first machine's already joined clny.viz. Actually, that should be CL1, shouldn't it? Let's go ahead and let's fix that here real quick. Let's put a 1 in there, huh? There we go. That's beautiful. Since it's the one that you're going to be using as your day-to-day machine, so you can access those servers remotely, that's why we set up that first Vista client. So what we're going to do is we're going to join your other machine to the domain, and we're going to rename it real quick. Then we're going to move your machines to the NY Computers OU. Okay? We need to have some machines there in that OU so we can do some tests as we go along throughout our entire process here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a new Vista machine. We'll rename it CL2-NY-Viz, and then we'll join that guide to the domain. Okay, so here we are on that Vista machine, and you'll notice here that this is what it will become right now. Let's take a real quick look at what it's currently named. I'm going to right-click here on my computer from the Start menu and go into its properties. And we'll see here that it's currently named Godzilla PC. Not exactly the most dignified name, but hey, I was kind of working in a pinch. So we're going to go ahead and change the settings on this right now. We're going to click on Continue, and we're just going to give this guy a real quick name change. And we're going to call him CL2-NY-Viz for Vista, of course. And we're not going to join it to a domain just yet because remember we have to have this new name first. We'll tell it OK. And it's going to prompt us to restart, so we'll go ahead and we will close all our windows. We'll go ahead and we'll restart our machine now. As soon as it restarts, I'll restart the recording and we'll take the next step. Alright, so you see here that the machine has rebooted and we have this great welcome window that shows back up every single time. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck Run at Startup and close this welcome window so it doesn't start every time we reboot. I also want to close the sidebar gadget and we'll close it. Come on now, there we go. Alright, so now we have renamed the machine. So let's go ahead and let's take a look. We're going to right click on my computer again, go into its properties. And it is in fact named CL2-NY-Viz. Now we're going to join it to the domain. And remember, when we join it to the domain, we're actually going to be creating a computer account in Active Directory. And we'll take a look at where those accounts are living at as soon as we get this guy named up here or joined up. We're going to go ahead and click on Change. We'll go to the Domain section, and then we'll type, of course, globomantics.com. Tell that guy OK with an Enter key, and now I need to log in with SuperCoach and provide those credentials, since right now SuperCoach is the only account that can actually allow other machines to join this domain. I'm going to tell it OK. And it's going to sit here and spin for just a little bit. You know, one thing that we didn't seem to have to wrestle this time around is we didn't seem to have to wrestle the DNS settings. So while this guy is joining the domain, let's do a quick CMD here from the Start menu. And let's do a quick ipconfig/all. And let's see what we got here. All right, let's double check the DNS settings. And looks like our DNS settings are A-OK. So I guess our router guy must have gone in and repaired those settings for us. Okay, that's fantastic. And looky here, welcome to the globomantics.com domain. You'll notice this time we didn't receive that RPC server unavailable error. It's one of those things that happens kind of randomly and rarely. So we didn't have to worry about that this time. We can tell it OK. And now we still have to restart the machine though. So we'll tell this guy OK and close. And once again, restarting the machine again. Take a look at this machine again as soon as it reboots. And you know what, we might try to log in with maybe a Hank Richardson or one of those other new logins that we created here. Oh, it doesn't look, it looks like it's rebooting really fast. That's fantastic. You know, let's go ahead and let's check out one of those other logins and let's see if those logins are actually valid and they work. We know SuperCoach is valid, but we don't know if H. Richardson or any of the others are actually active. So let's try one out here as soon as this guy boots all the way back up. And wow, we didn't have to wait hardly any time at all for it this time around. All right, there we go. So we'll do a quick Control-Alt-Delete here. And notice once again that it's trying to get us to log into this particular machine as the Godzilla local administrator account. Let's click on Switch User and then Other User. And now we're logging on to Globomantics. All right, neat. So let's go ahead and let's try Hank Richardson's account here. And we'll use the default password that we used for all of our other accounts, P_SSW0RD. And we'll hit the Enter key. And hey, looky there. The user's password must be changed before logging on the first time. Okay, we'll tell it okay. And now we'll go ahead and we'll change Hank's password here. Of course, we should probably let him know what that new password is. Or we can always reset it later on. But it looks like our domain is working A-OK. Hank's account seems to have logged in all right. We're changing the password. And we're looking pretty good right now. Let's just go ahead and wait for just a second while this machine boots up into Hank's account fully. Because we don't want any surprises, especially when Hank, the CEO of the company, comes in and sits down at his machine for the first time. All right, looks like everything worked A-OK. Looks like Hank is connected. He does have local and internet access. Here's that really crazy, annoying welcome window once again. All right, so we see that Hank Richardson is logged in A-OK. And we'll go ahead and we'll just close this welcome window. And we'll close out the sidebar here as well. and we'll uncheck Start Sidebar when Windows starts. Of course, unless Hank wants us to turn it back on for him, right? So we have successfully logged into this machine with one of those user accounts that we had created earlier. That's good news. That probably means that the rest of our user accounts are going to be A-OK as well. Now, of course, I could sit here and try each and every one of them as time gone on, but that's a little silly. If there is any problems with any of the user accounts, I'm sure the users will come and tell us or get us on the phone, right? All right, so now let's go ahead and let's switch on over to our other Windows Vista machine, and let's log into DC1 and let's make sure that those computer accounts are intact. All right, here we are on the Windows Vista 64 edition of our GlobalMantic machine. This is, of course, CL1. And let's go ahead and log into CL1 here as SuperCoach. Now, of course, this is the one we've been doing all the work on. Let's go ahead and open up DC1 here. And let's see what's happening with our Active Directory now that we've joined two machines to the domain. All right. Right up front here, we see cl1-ny.viz. That's the machine that we're currently on, so that's good news. Let's go ahead and let's hit the F5 key. And hey, there's CL2. So right now we have two machines joined to the domain. That's fantastic, but you know what? They're in the wrong OU. Well, not necessarily wrong, but I really should say the default OU. So we're going to move them from computers over here to NY computers. Notice that NY computers is currently blank. I'm going to click here on computers, and I'm going to simply hold down the shift key and click on both of these two machines. I'm going to drag them down into NY computers. Now, of course, we're going to get this slight cussing here that says, hey, you know, when you move stuff in Active Directory, it can really squirrel things up. And again, that is true when you have a lot of stuff already set up in Active Directory. But since we're doing initial configuration, we're going to be okay here. So we're going to go ahead and tell this yes. And now let's take a look at NY computers, and there they are. Fantastic. So everything's been working really well for us, and even the couple of hiccups that we had, we've been able to solve. So now that we have user accounts, and a whole bunch of them, 26 to be exact, now we also have NY computers, so we have two of those. So we're now ready to take our users and our computers and actually put them into groups. So let's switch back on over to the slides now. And let's talk about this whole group thing. All right, so we're going to be creating new objects called groups. And some of you are thinking, hey, you know what? Aren't they already NOUs? Aren't they already technically grouped, quote unquote? And the short answer is no. Right? Just because they live in OUs does not mean that they are part of groups. Groups are separate types of objects. And let's talk about the difference between the two. Remember, OUs keep your objects organized. And they're used to control what users and computers can and can't do. That's the core usage of OUs, and that's a great and wonderful thing. Now, groups, on the other hand, they're Active Directory objects that allow you to provide and deny access to resources like printers and folders en masse. You know what I mean? En masse, I'm talking about all together. Now, here's probably the biggest difference. Groups are objects that live in organizational units. Okay? So there's one real easy way to tell them apart, is that one lives inside the other. Okay, so let's kind of bring this out a little bit more. Again, let's talk about the differences here. OUs can be used to control what a user can do. So let's say that in our NY users OU, we have 25 user accounts, and again, we actually have 26. We can use a tool called Group Policy, which we're going to talk about in another video in this series. But we can say, yes, all these users can save documents to their desktops, they can lock or hide the taskbar. We can determine what these users can and cannot do. We can also say these users may not change the desktop wallpaper. And by the way, that's a great way to prevent sexual harassment lawsuits. We can also say, you know what, users, you cannot install software. That's a really smart idea, because if you've worked in and around IT at all, and you know I have, and I've seen what people do to their machines and the kind of software that they install, by denying access to install software, we can prevent a lot of virus issues, a lot of spyware issues, a lot of just bad software issues, software that can cause problems not only just on a particular machine, but also throughout the network. Okay, so that's an OU. Let's talk about a group now. I want to kind of really bring this home to you because I really want you to understand the difference between the two. A group controls what a user has access to. So let's talk about shared folders and printers on a network now. If we have users that are part of the sales users group, we can say, all right, you guys get access to this shared sales folder and you can get access to this sales printer. All right, that's fantastic. But if you tried to get access to this shared operations folder or to the operations department printer, we can say no way. This way we can control which resources our groups of users have access to. Now, this is useful in a whole lot of ways. First of all, it prevents a lot of fights at work. I know it sounds kind of funny, but if you only have one printer and you have 8 departments that are all fighting over this one printer, bad things, man, bad things. But if we have multiple resources that different departments can have access to, using groups to control access to those resources can really help interdepartmental relationships. It can take a lot of strain off things. But also when it comes to dealing with sensitive documents, you don't necessarily want one department reading what the other department has, especially if that department is human resources. And the human resources department has a document containing everyone's salary information and all that other good sensitive stuff we have to be concerned about. So again, OUs organize and control what they can do. Groups control what resources a user has access to, or really a group of users has access to. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to be creating here. Your user accounts are created. They're living happily in the OU. And so now you need to create groups because we need to prepare for providing some access to different resources. We do have, at least at this point in time, 2 different departments in globalmantics.com. We're going to be adding 4 different groups for users in the New York Users OU. Okay, remember a group lives in an OU. And we're going to be creating 2 groups for computers in the NY Computers OU. Now we can group users. We can also group computers. In the very next video, you're going to see some very direct consequences of what you can do with groups in terms of users. Now computer groups are still useful, but we use them less. But it's good to have them in groups because there's all kinds of security things that we can do with groups later on. But again, let's just take things step by step. What we're doing is we're creating the ability for us to start having a lot of control and management power over our network and our machines. So we're going to be creating these groups. We're going to be creating sales users, sales managers, ops users, and ops managers. And then we're going to be creating standard computers and IT computers. Now, standard computers are going to be what everybody pretty much in the company uses. IT computers, however, that's what us as the IT department are going to be using. We're probably going to be providing more access to these machines than these machines here. But again, we're going to tackle the whole giving and granting resources and what users can and can't do in additional videos in this series. Okay, but right now we're just creating the structure so we can make that possible. So let's go ahead and let's bounce back on over to the Vista machine that we were working with earlier, which is currently logged into DC1, and let's create these 6 different groups. All right, back on the Vista machine that is currently logged in to our DC1 using remote desktop. So let's go here to the NY Users OU, and we're going to be creating groups here. We're going to right click. Actually, we can just right click here on New Users. We're going to go to New, and we're going to go to Group and create a group right here in NY Users. So let's go ahead and let's start off with Sales Users. And we're going to leave the default options for these groups as they are for the time being. Later on in this video series, we're going to talk more about what these items mean. But for right now, I want you to understand that most of the time when you're in a small to medium environment, the default options are just fine. All right, I'm going to tell this guy OK. And that's going to create our sales users group. Let's go ahead and let's make another one here. Right click, new, and group. And we'll do sales managers. That'll be okay. Let's do, we got 2 more, right? 2 more. We got sales users and sales managers, so we need to do our ops side. So we'll do ops users. And we'll also do ops managers. Now, by the way, you remember that whole DSAdd thing I was talking with you about? You can actually use DSAdd to do this exact thing as well. You simply use DSAdd group, and then you put in the distinguished name of the group. But we'll tackle that again later on in the course, so don't forget about that DSAdd thing. Okay, so here's our 4 groups we've created here in NY users. Now let's go to the computer side and let's make some groups here. Even though we only have 2 machines, we're going to be using these groups and these computers for testing. And so we are going to go ahead and set these up anyway, because we're going to be testing stuff as we build it, especially as the videos continue here. So we want to make sure that things are as real as they can get. All right, so now we have our 2 computer groups here. We also have our 4, where'd they go? Here they are, our 4 groups for our users. Now for the next trick. Okay, we need to place our users into the appropriate groups. Now here's how this is going to work. Let's start with the computers first. Okay, the computers are easy because there's only 2. Now we're going to start with CL1. We're going to right click on this guy and we're going to select Add to Group. Now we type in the name of the group that we're going to add him to. We'll do IT Computers. And now we'll check the name. Hey, it looks like it found it. If you see it underlined, that means it's good. We're going to tell it okay. All right, the Add to Group operation was successfully completed. That's neat. Let's do CL2 now. This is going to be our testing machine for our standard users. So as we do work and try to lock down the desktops and provide access to different resources for different users, we're going to be using this guy to test out our stuff with. So we'll add him to the standard computers group. And again, we'll check the name just to make sure we didn't mistype it and tell it OK. And looks like that was successful. That's fantastic. Now let's take a look at the properties of our groups. Let's take a look at first standard computers. I'm going to double click on this guy. I'm going to go to the Members tab. In the Members tab, it tells me who or what is a member of this group, who belongs to this group. And it looks like CL2 is. Fantastic. Now, I could also add additional computers here right now by simply clicking on the add and then typing in the name of that particular machine. Right? That's pretty neat. Also, we're going to talk more about this later on, but a group can actually be a member of another group. But that's a different video. Let's take her slow. I'm going to tell this guy OK. So adding our computers was really easy because there's only 2 computers and 2 groups. NY users, however, we have a lot of users. Okay? And so this one is going to be a little more interesting because we have 4 groups that they need to go into. Now, we need to go back and take a look at Hank's original email that he sent to us, but the process is exactly identical. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to pretend that we looked at Hank's document for time's sake, and we're going to control-click on multiple users. Okay? When you hold down the control key and select different users, you can select non-contiguous or users that are not right next to each other. Now, if you do shift click, you select users between the 2 that you've selected. Okay, so if I start by selecting here on B Altman and come down and shift click on N Califiano, I select everybody in between. But if I hold down the control key instead, I can select multiple users at the same time, but they don't have to be right next to each other. All right, so what I'm going to do with these users here is we're going to add these users to our sales users group. So I'm going to right click on any one of them and select Add to Group. And now we're going to type in here sales users. Let's check the name just to make sure. Hey, we're okay. We're going to tell it okay. All right, so now let's select some different users. Yep, you know what? We should probably just click on one of these so we can get other users in here. We'll kind of keep on coming down here a little bit. There we go. I'm going to right click and we're going to add these 2 sales managers. Now, obviously, if I was a really good IT individual, I'd have maybe a printed list of what Hank had sent me, or maybe have it up on another screen, or probably just have it open somewhere. But I seem to be kind of cheating at this point. So Right now I'm just selecting users that I think should be in the different groups, and then adding them to the groups. And you see that the process is really easy. We'll go ahead, we'll add these folks here to ops users, check the name, and tell it OK. All right. Looks like we need to do ops managers here real quick. Let's make sure that Hank Richardson is in the ops manager group. There we go. Check the name and OK. All right. So we've added users to our different groups. Let's go ahead and let's double click now on, let's do ops users. Let's double click and let's take a look at it. And here are the members that are part of the ops users. And tell it OK. Now I can also double click on any one of my user objects here, my user accounts, and I can go into its properties and I can see what they're a member of. And it looks like this particular individual is part of domain users. And by the way, this is something that whenever you create a user account, you're always put into domain users. And there's not a really good reason not to be. But you see here that this user is also part of sales users, and that's good. Okay, we could add additional groups to this user account though if we wanted to, or we could also remove. Now down here at the bottom you see where it says set primary group. There's no need to change primary group unless you have Macintosh clients or POSIX compliant applications. Unless you're dealing with a mixed environment, you probably don't have to worry about this too much, and you can leave the domain users as the primary group. All right, so our users have been placed into groups. Our computers have been placed into groups. So we're in pretty good shape. We know that our user accounts are most likely going to work because we did test out Hank Richardson. And so friends, we're looking really good in terms of what we have accomplished so far in this video. So let's go ahead and let's mosey on back over to the slides and let's start talking about a little bit of a wrap up here. At the end here, this is what our network looks like now. Right? We have two machines, our two domain controllers hanging out over here. We have built our primary OU. We've built our network, or I'm sorry, our New York users and our user accounts. We have built groups for users. We have built NY computers as a child OU. We have added 2 computer accounts, and we have added those accounts to our 2 groups we have built as well. Remember, we're going to be using those for testing, building of this network all throughout this video series. All right, so to wrap up, here's some IT vocabulary that you need to know. And this is just basic stuff that we've already gone over. User account, you know that those objects allow users to access network resources. Computer accounts allow Active Directory to have security relationship with the computer, and it also allows you to control what a computer does on the network. Organizational units, we talked about those as being containers, as places for our other objects to live, and also provides control, whereas a group is an Active Directory object that lives in an OU and allows or denies access to network resources like folders or printers. Now a batch script, we took a look at 2 different kinds of batch scripts actually. And the batch script, remember, all it is just a regular old text file. We can write it in Notepad, and it contains commands, and that file needs to have a .bat suffix as its file name. That way Windows understands that, hey, this is actually an executable. This is something that I can use and run commands inside of. And don't forget about that whole distinguished name thing. We hit on it just a little bit. It's going to keep coming back at us, but the distinguished name is the name of an object as it appears in the Active Directory database. Remember, it starts off with CN equals, and then we put in a common name, then the OU name, then the DC name, and all that good stuff. So if it's not fully clear yet, don't worry, because we're going to keep coming back to those distinguished names over and over and over and over again until you get it, I promise. All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about what you should be able to do after viewing this video. You should be able to create organizational units and groups in Active Directory users and computers in Server Manager. You should be able to also create user accounts in Active Directory users and computers. Remember how we right-clicked and created that one? But I also taught you how to use the ds-add command line option. Also in a batch script, you should be able to create a bunch of user accounts with that batch script made out of that Excel sheet that I showed you. Remember, that Excel sheet is included with this course. It's very easy to use. Copy and paste, tweak a few things, save out that last sheet as a text file and run it on the server. You should be able to add a computer account by joining a Vista client to the domain, and we've done 2 of those now in this series. We only did 1 in this video. We did 1 in the last video. Again, that's kid stuff, right? I mean, that's stuff that by now you've probably already tackled multiple times. You should be able to manually create a computer account, which is a bad idea. You know what? I didn't actually show you that, did I? You know why? Because it's a bad idea. Okay, moving on. Adding users and computers to groups using that Active Directory users and computers interface. Again, in Server Manager, we saw that we can control-click on the different users and right-click and add them to a group quickly and easily. Now, again, I'm going to show you more about this whole group thing in a later video. We're going to be creating new groups. We're going to be rearranging some groups. So I'm not that worried about how we set up our groups right now, because I'm going to be showing you more advanced ways and more powerful ways to manage users and groups later on in the series. You should be able to move Active Directory objects to different OUs. Remember when we moved our computers out of computers and into NY computers? All you got to do is drag and drop. So dragging and dropping is perfectly valid, and just remember, after you have a lot of stuff set up in Active Directory, once you're out of the preliminary building stages, if you start moving stuff around, it could cause bad things. All right? We'll see why that is in later videos, obviously, but once we start assigning permissions and group policies and all kinds of other stuff, moving stuff in Active Directory is not a strong recommendation unless you are very, very careful about it. Okay, so now we have some OUs, we have some user accounts, we have some groups. So in the next 2 videos, I'm going to show you how to start using those OUs and groups in order to provide a lot of control over what's happening in your network. So there's a lot of great stuff ahead, and so I'm going to see you in that next video coming up.